and get started. If you have any questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat, or you can wait until the end if you have any questions. I will follow up. So everyone who's on today, I will follow up with an email afterwards with any important links and links to other videos in this series. So just look for an email from me probably later today with just some follow-up information. So Mike, if you want to get started, thank you.
Hey everybody, and yeah, thanks for being here. So let's get to it. Cost control. What are we going to learn today? We're gonna go over spectrum best practice, and I'll call it a bit of process then to monitor our labor cost as well as our equipment cost on jobs. So this obviously applies to self-perform tasks, or for an equipment company, or for an equipment company. We'll also look at monitoring and managing overhead cost. The second bullet point, we'll look at some spectrum tools and techniques to manage growth. That's kind of vague. I'm really zeroing in on if we're expanding into new markets, maybe opening up or acquiring business units, maybe we're expanding into other customer types, whatever that is, managing that within the system. We'll look at some ways to make informed decisions about our equipment, whether to repair, replace, or rent. I didn't put rent on there. And we'll also, this comes up a lot, or comes up frequently enough, how can we manage our compliance with loan covenants inside of the software? And so I thought I would cover that. That's kind of one of those FAQs I always want to make sure we cover. Who should attend? When I put this material together, it's really intended for key decision makers, whether it be owners, the CFO and controller folks, project managers, any other key decision makers that are in the business of running the business. Okay. All right, brief introduction. I got started as a CPA. I sold that practice in the early 90s, mid 90s. Went to work as a CFO at a construction company. I felt like really that's where and I use this term, that's where I cut my teeth and really learned what's going on out there. I was really appreciative of that experience and everything that I learned. From there, I was recruited by a then competitor of the Spectrum software. And so I went in as a partner and built another practice selling software and consulting, and did that, I don't know, 25-ish years-ish. And we moved over to the Dexter and Cheney product 10, 11 years ago, for the entire reasons everybody here is here, because of the next generation and the way that the company invests in themselves and in their software and their clients. And for whatever it's worth, once a year I look back and I say, was that a good decision? And no changes yet. Okay, yet. But recently I sold our practice to the folks here at Viewpoint Midwest Gulf Coast nearly a year ago. And so my role, like Steven said, is Director of Business Development now. All right, so how are we going to get there today? The agenda, we'll look at analyzing labor and equipment cost on our job costing, including productivity. That's such a key component for self-perform. We'll also look at managing and minimizing overhead costs. That's important to all of us in our businesses. We'll look at how can we set up to monitor and manage our investment in new markets, new lines of business, new regions, whatever we're going into that's expanding our business. Cost control, we'll look at technology investment. When does it make sense to invest in project management and or sub-cost ERP systems? We'll look at strategic hiring of key personnel to support our growth. Obviously a biggie on cost there. Quick note on maximizing ROI on capital invested in equipment, some things available in the system to help you with that. And then back to that debt management, keeping debt levels within targets and managing the loan covenants. I realize that we're bopping around a little bit here, and there's actually a method to this madness, believe it or not. And this next slide really speaks to that. Think about your implementation. The goal of implementing an ERP system is to get you up and live and stabilize accounting ASAP. All right. That's really what the consultants are focusing on stabilizing accounting so we could close the project. The reality is when you made the decision to invest in mid-market construction ERP software, you had your sights on some value add things that you really know can help your business. And sometimes we see those in the implementation. Many times, though, what happens is we're focused on getting you up and going. And by the time it comes for that optimization, you've got project fatigue, you've got to get back to business, your people need to focus on what they do. The project needs to be closed and you need to move on. And some of these things don't get looked at. That's not good, it's not bad, it's the way it works out. And too many times we see companies coming to us needing that next level of optimization, so to speak. And so that's what really today's about, is looking at some of these tools that quite honestly, we don't see being used out there as frequently as I'd like to see them. And so I want to mention those. And my hopes are if there's one or two things you see and you go, hey man, we need that, then time well spent. That's my hope. All right, let's jump in then. First one is productivity. Pretend, if you will, that you're self-performing and costs are up, and you're trying to figure out, is it efficiency or productivity out in the field, or is it a cost factor? What's going on? A lot of times you're looking at a job cost report and you just can't tell. So I'm going to flip over to Spectrum. And Stephen, can you see Spectrum coming up okay?
Yes, sir.
All righty, thank you, sir. And so let's just say that I'm in this Talbot Professional Center job, and just to kind of walk us down this path. And let's say I'm looking at cost and hours, and I can see on the job analysis, and I see, I've got so much cost to date and so many labor hours that I've spent. All right. But that doesn't really tell me a whole lot. So I flip over to my cost and hours view, and I've got this grouped up by cost type, and I can see, all right, labor, I've got my estimate and projected are $9,000. I've burned through 260 of the, I'm sorry, hours. I've burned through 260 of those. My cost is what my cost is. I really don't have a lot of information right now to tell me if I'm on track. The idea is, if I'm not on track, I want to know it while it's happening, while there's time to do something about it. That's the overall goal. If I walk down the line, then I can see that my estimated and projected cost per hour is $45, and my job to date cost per hour is 28. Well, 28's less than 45, so it looks at first glance like I'm okay on this job. Okay. Now I know we want to find out why that's a big difference, but it looks like I'm okay. Well, if we drill down to the things that we're focusing on, and I'll just focus on concrete, that particular task or phase, we're projecting and estimating $60 an hour on concrete work, but we're actually coming in at 75. So there's going to be some overs and some unders that wash out to that net that we looked at, but I have something going on here. And so my next question is there a productivity issue out there? Or is it potentially a cost issue? You don't know right now with what we're looking at. Okay. What a lot of people will do is they'll flip over to, in job cost, the productivity report. And I've used saved selections so I can zero in on concrete for this one job, and I'll just leave all of this the same. And honestly, if you do self-perform work, I don't know how your PMs would get by without this. So I'm on this job, Summit Professional Center. I'm looking at phase 0330 concrete work. And I'm going to start with my estimate and my projected cost. All right. My estimate and projection, they're the same for now. All right, I've got $9,000 of cost estimated. I'm thinking it's going to take 160 hours. And I'm going to pour 320 cubic yards of concrete. All right. So we are tracking production quantities here. So this tells me then that my dollar per hour is going to be $60. It's telling me my dollar per cubic yard of concrete is going to be 30. And then my hours per cubic yard are half an hour. So that's what my takeoff was. It worked into an estimate and my current projections are. Now, when I look at what's happened so far, all right, cost is 15. All right, hours are 20. Cubic yards are 40. It's data. So far, it's like the old days where you would just throw papers on somebody's desk and say, here's what you asked for, and it would be up to them to interpret. Well, now we can look at my dollars per hour. My actual dollars per hour are running 75. Boom. My dollars per hour are higher than my estimate. So it's a cost issue. Then I say, are there any productivity issues? Well, if I keep going, my dollars per cubic yard are obviously higher because my cost is higher, but my productivity, how many hours is it taking to do a cubic yard? Half an hour. And that was my estimate. So productivity is fine out in the field, at least for now. I know that I have a cost issue. So now we back up and we ask questions. What's going on? Do we have new labor contracts that got missed in the estimate? That happens, right? Do we have different crews? There's a reason, and that's what the PM is going to do next, is find out why. And then once the PM gets comfortable, I wanted to let you know really quickly how to adjust this in the projection, the projected cost estimate. I see this being kind of a gray area. So if I pop back over to the job analysis and I go over to costs and projected cost, I'm going to build this right quick for FP1. Now, I don't suggest this. In fact, I highly don't recommend it out in real world, but I'm just going to focus on 0330 and cost etal. For training and education, there's a rule when talking about complex things or topics, use simple data. And that's a key success factor to us all understanding this, including me. So I'm just going to narrow this down. And I'm going to build that. So that puppy's done. Now I'll go ahead and. So now we're looking at just that one task, concrete. And these numbers, we've already looked at these numbers. And up in settings and calculations, I told it I want units per hour. All right, not the other way around. So we're getting 2 units per hour versus half an hour per. Okay. But as I look at my at completion, my dollars, I don't want to mess with that, at least not right now. Hang tight on that. The hours I project on the job, I've got no indication the hours are going to change because productivity is fine. However, the dollar per hour, I started at 60 on my estimate. I'm seeing it come in at 75. If I've got no reason to believe that'll be different, I want my cost of completion, my estimated completion, to be 75. Notice when I hit tab or enter off of that, my dollars per unit come into line at 37.50 per my actual, and I've got no changes in my productivity. So all it did was it changed my dollars. So that's a very simple way then, simple, right? That's a very straightforward way to figure out, is it productivity or is it a cost element, and then adjust the right portion of the estimated completion so that your projected cost, projected productivity, and your contract status report are coming out okay. Let's get rid of him. And I realize I'm going kind of fast. My hope is that if this strikes a nerve, you'll have the recording of this will be made available to everyone, and you can go back and check it out. Put a reality check on that. If you're kind of new to Spectrum, you may need your consultant to help you through some of that. for a lot of us who've been on the software for a while, you might go, I'll watch the video and I think I've got this. So want you to be successful and also set expectations on how to get to the end on that. All right. Ways to monitor and analyze your overhead. Really, it's a matter of just like a job, just like a project, set a budget, and then monitor progress along the timeline on that budget and keep costs within budget. Now, the reality is sometimes we'll adjust mid-year or periodically through the year. Some are higher, some are lower. But the key to managing cost is to set a budget and monitor it and adjust where necessary. So in general ledger, and we're talking about overhead here, okay? In GL, this guy's just not cooperating for me. In GL, we can assign or input budget amounts to all of our overhead accounts, well, to all of our accounts, period, okay? And there's a nice tool in Spectrum to monitor. If I go to GL, inquiry, and summary analysis, I'm using save selections to save my criteria here, but I'm telling the system I only want to see overhead accounts. So in my sample data, all the overhead starts with a 7. All right. If you recall, your accountant probably spent, not your accountant, your implementation consultant probably spent a lot of time focusing on best practice on the chart of accounts. This is a great reason why. It makes things like what we're about to do simple and easy. The reality is, if it's not best practice, it becomes more complicated. So I'm just trying to help bridge that gap, okay, on what your implementation person was doing and how it kind of comes together. So in this example, overhead starts with a 7. So if I hit enter through that, these are all of my overhead accounts. They all start with 7. And then I've got a column for the budget and the actual, and then the variance. And of course, I use saved selections to do this. So in terms of managing the cost of overhead, it's a very common and best practice for during closing and sometimes before closing. The finance people will go down your overhead accounts and you can see I don't have a budget for everything, but they'll compare budget to actual. Now this is doing two things. If I'm over, let's just say rent. Well, I'm under on rent. I'm going to research why. Why am I so far over on rent? But take professional fees. I'm 6,000, or maybe admin expense, admin salaries is a better idea, or either one. I'm way under budget. My actual is 4, my budget's 10. Do I have to accrue expenses because they haven't come in yet? And that's such an important part of period costing on your financial statements to get a true representation of, did I make money or did I lose money during the period? So this is really serving us for both ways. Do I need to accrue? And also, why am I over budget? But anyway, tips and tricks then, if you want to research rent, because I've got cost centers, I'll go down to my 5, and I'll double click that guy. And he just takes me then to the detail. And here I say, oh, I've got an AP invoice and my vendor is Heather's Haulers. We're not renting from Heather's Haulers. So I click that. And then remember, document imaging, it's not a third-party product. It's always hovering if we want to look at a document associated with a transaction. And because it's not third-party, it's right here, ready and waiting. So I can highlight that. I can click on my DI, document imaging, and I go, oh, wait a minute, this is a job cost. So now I've identified a reclassification from rent to something else. Actually, job revenue is understated, gross profit's understated, because I didn't have all my costs in there for percent complete. So not a big dollar amount. What if it was, though? I'm not recognizing more profit on my P&L because I've got more cost. My percent complete goes up. And now I know also I've got to accrue cost to pick up rent that never came in. I didn't get the rent invoice this month. So some pretty big adjustments on the financial statements as a result of just this simple little tool. So let's keep going here. Actually, we're going to go the right direction. We're not going to go backwards. We're going to go forwards. My wife wanted it when I said it. Managing cost. So we've been in business. We're to the point we're expanding in new lines of business and or maybe new market segments or locations. Maybe we've bought additional locations or we're investing in them. Maybe we're going into new market segments, different kinds of customers. Point is, we want to manage the investment and know that our costs are what we thought they would be, and that our revenue and our ROI on these are what we thought they would be. And sometimes it's even more important to know that we're not distracting and seeing negative results on the things that got us here. In other words, the lines of business and the markets that we are in, making money that got us to this point. So we're wanting to watch both. So how do we do this in Spectrum? Enter cost centers. And this is actually part of Spectrum's secret sauce. Flip back over to the software here. So I'm going to show you in my sample data here. I'll start by showing you a listing of the active cost centers. This is sample data, test data, so we're going to have some icky stuff in here. But my cost centers, think of these as divisions, think of these as lines of business, think of these as locations, think of them as other companies. It's the financial structure of how we break down our operations. So I've got corporate, like corporate expenses. I can easily handle confidential payroll this way. And then I'm breaking down my company into its functional areas. I've got my cost of estimating. How do we manage cost? Well, first we capture it and we watch it. My cost of estimating, my cost of marketing, my cost of accounting, maybe safety's in there. All right. And now I'm starting to segue in operations. I've got my indirect cost, my shop and my equipment. I've got my jobs. Sometimes jobs will be broken down by market segment or area. We want to run reports on those. And then I self-perform sheet metal plumbing, and I've got a service department. There's quite a bit going on here. I don't want one P&L or one job cost report giving me a number. I want this broken down so I can see how I'm doing in each. And heaven forbid, if and when times get tough, if I've got to make some changes, where can I do that to have the least financial impact on my company? One note, your consultant and you, when you implement, you cannot possibly spend enough time talking about cost centers. Your consultant's trying to really understand, how do you think about your business? How do you break down your operations? What are you thinking about for the future? And so what does this list look like? What does the coding look like? So it's intuitive and it's, more importantly, it's easy. Another thing is, it's so important in implementation to stay out of the software and kind of work up examples in Excel. All right, stay creative, stay thinking, and think about your business and how you break it down, and come up with lists in Excel. And you'll come up with 3, 4, 5 iterations before you go, yeah, that's who we are. It's an interesting exercise too, because it helps you think about who you are. But then, what does this do for us, right? So when we set up a job, let me attack them this way. When we set up a job, we have to tell the job what cost center he is in, okay? And then all of the revenue for that job and all of the costs for that job will flow to that cost center. All right. Operators don't have to do anything. It's totally transparent to them. In fact, they can't change it. It just goes that way. If you opened up a fabrication shop, we would assign a cost center for fab shop to that shop. Okay. If you were producing manufactured parts or assembled components in that fab shop, they would all run through that fab shop cost center and then go into inventory for when you're ready to assign those to jobs or issue those to jobs. So it's not really a complicated concept at all. And then what does that do for us? Well, if we were to run down to under reports, run down to the contract status report that we've all come to know and love. Well, now I can run my contract status report for everybody, for a whole bucket of everything in the company. Or I can say, hey man, just how's my plumbing department doing? I want to know about their jobs. I want to know about their gross profit. I want to see the trending and what maybe most important, what the backlog in plumbing looks like. Okay. Same thing with HVAC or sheet metal or jobs. I can now get profitability, backlog for each one individually or group them up to compare and contrast. Maybe I've got sheet metal across different locations. Well, now I can compare and contrast. How's my sheet metal doing as a whole versus by location compared to plumbing, compared to job costs or jobs. Additionally, what that's going to provide for us is financial statements. Now, when you run a financial statement, you can tell that financial statement, I want him in summary, all right, everybody together, or you can say, no. I want an individual cost center or break down all the cost centers, and then I can define those on this grid. So you can also get a financial statement for your equipment shop, for your fab shop, for your job or job types, for your plumbing, your HVAC, sheet metal, so on and so on. So the use of cost centers affords you, that breakdown in job cost reports and also in financials. And for whatever it's worth, we can then set security by cost center also if that's important to you. But managing costs, this is kind of big as we go down that growth line as the company matures and grows into other segments. How are we doing here? About halfway. All right, technology investment. When is the time to be looking at project management software, estimating software, project management software, and then job cost accounting ERP software or equipment ERP software? What I would characterize this conversation as general rules and lessons learned. The caveat is, or the main thing is, it's got to make sense for your business, right? Every business is different. I'm looking at some notes here. What we've seen in the 30 plus years we've been helping construction companies grow and in selling, implementing, and helping construction companies with process consulting as they grow is just a few key questions here. On the estimating, as you're growing, are you spending way too much time on estimates and making mistakes? Is the owner involved when the owner should be focusing? Well, forgive me, that sounded disrespectful. When hopefully the owner's focusing on business development and client relationships. You're talking to the key offender here, by the way. So those are thoughts around, is it time to be looking at estimating software? Kind of similar with PM, similar but different. As we grow and the owner and key decision makers can't be involved in everything, our project managers managing in different systems so that key decision makers don't have visibility. So important. Traditionally, it's Excel, right? Well, if I'm an owner and I'm trying to focus on making deals and client relationships, I need visibility to what's happening on the project and change management side of things. And I can't be going into everybody's Excel spreadsheets. I need a system where I've got it right in front of me, what's happening, so that I'm confident my PMs are doing what they're supposed to be doing. The jobs are coming out. We're going to have happy clients, referable clients, and I can focus on what I need to focus on. So if I'm getting uncomfortable with that, and this is the number one thing or reason we've seen companies come to us to look at project management and ERP software, is visibility. In terms of job cost or equipment cost software, the ERP side, the number one common thing the companies need is accurate real-time job cost and equipment cost reports and information. There's a lot of other reasons they come to us, but the number one common thread, and I'm using the word accurate and real-time job and equipment cost reports. If you're in the group here and you're thinking about buying Spectrum or looking at it, or project side or one of our estimating projects, I would kind of be thinking about those things. And if it's striking a nerve, please, we're happy to talk to you about it. We want you to be successful as much as you do, and happy to talk to it as your advocate and advisor about whether it makes sense for your company. Cost, strategic hiring, looking at the time of personnel to support your growth. As I put this together and was looking and I was researching, I felt like yours truly was the number one key offender, and almost like a poster child of what not to do here. Owning a company for 30 years, okay, and I come with humility and just, I'll say it right up front. Were it not for a coach in my life, kind of later on in this process, my business probably would have come out different. But that's first of all, so I don't forget, having a coach to help you stay focused on what's important and how to grow. At least for me, and as I've talked to some others, it's so important to help keep us on track. We haven't done this before, right? So like anything we haven't done before, we need help and advice. But as we look at hiring, there's these levels of growth, and I think of these as stair steps. And it's hard. It's difficult to get across these stair steps successfully. Some companies don't. But when we're starting out, we're bumping up against that $2 million gross annual revenue. It's probably the owner. Maybe there's an admin, maybe not. There's a foreman probably, but it's a small team, and you're outsourcing accounting. Okay, and I'm looking at some notes I took here. Key things are that the owner is also an operations person, and that owner's doing everything. Okay, that's not sustainable, but that's where it starts. That's where it started for all of us. Kind of a key or a general guideline is consider adding an admin person or a bookkeeper when the paperwork consumes more than about 20% of a person's week. All right. So when the paperwork is more than about a day a week, I'd be thinking about an admin or a bookkeeper at that point. Think about an estimator or a project coordinator when your bidding is increasing, but you're seeing the accuracy start to suffer. People are just trying to do too much with the time they have in a day. The goal here, and this is so important, burn this into memory. The goal is to free up the owner for business development and client relationships. We got to keep the owner out of the day-to-day so that he or she can grow the company. And again, you're talking to the worst offender here, so you can consider that. So we're growing now. If we get up to somewhere between 2 and 5, this is another one of those stair steps. We've added a PM and an estimator. I can't spell beginning, but we're beginning formal scheduling and cost tracking. But at this point, this is another hard one. You want to think about a project manager when the owner or the superintendent is managing more than $2 million in projects. Okay, that's just kind of a threshold to start looking at this. You want to think about a superintendent when crews need daily oversight, and that just makes sense, right? Be thinking about an estimator or pre-construction when we're losing bids with slow responses. sometimes we're so sucked into the detail, it's hard to step back and just look at some of these things. And think about safety and QC when we've got more than 20 employees. Now this range here, getting from 5 up to 20, that's sometimes some of the hardest growth that there is, at least that we've seen with clients. It's at that point where if cash flow and or job costing is getting too complex, it's not simple. And the owner's spending, and key people are spending way too much time on that. It's time to be looking at a controller or CFO to do that for you. That way they deliver you the information. You take somewhere between 1 minute and 5 to process it, understand it, and you're back off to what you need to be doing. Be thinking about an operations manager when you've got multiple PMs and you need coordination there, and you need to not be the person doing that as the owner. Be thinking about HR or talent management, not only software, but manager, when hiring is impacting your ability to deliver on a job site. And then be thinking about business development and marketing when your pipeline needs consistency. As a business owner, I woke up every day thinking how much overhead is covered every day. If I could have not been thinking about that, maybe I had a business development person thinking about that. And I was thinking on what are the jobs? What's the status? Who needs attention? Are the customers happy? Boy, would the business have grown a lot faster, And then in terms of regional expansion, there's some good advice out there to hire a regional manager or a manager, if maybe not regional expansion, but expansion in other markets or lines of business. Hire that manager before you make those changes. That's good advice. It's a hard investment to make, but having walked the path that I did, I truly believe that's the right investment to make. And then, of course, thinking about a safety director or QC person when you've got more than 50 or 75 people out in the field. Again, take that burden off of you and other key people. The other thing that I found when I researched is that when the owner or key people are working more than 60 hours a week, your growth is going to stall. They're not focused on business development. Happy clients, your business is going to stall out. And I've walked that path. So that's a good threshold to be thinking about. I'm working more than 60 hours a week. Anyway, I hope that that's helpful. All right, we've got about 20 minutes here. We're going to flip now to equipment control. Obviously a big impact on cost. Now, equipment control could be, I'm an equipment company and I've got yellow iron out there. It could also be, I'm a service company and I've got a fleet of trucks, or I'm a construction company, I've got a fleet of vehicles. Same concept. I want to show you a couple of reports that are baked into the system. We've got, by the way, we put together not only a listing of job cost reports, but also equipment reports, including who would use them and for what purpose. And I'm going to focus on 2 of them here. In the equipment module, if you're using it, there's an equipment unit cost report that is good for cost control. That's what this is about, right? And its purpose is to analyze your equipment cost based on the elapsed primary meter, miles, hours, whatever it is. And I'll just flip really quickly here. And what this guy is telling us is for this half ton, our unit cost is 0.0176. I don't have good data in here, but it's telling us our per mile cost on our vehicles as we run down the road. I think that's pretty valuable information. There are a number of other reports in here, may or may not apply, fuel and oil, diesel, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to flip down to the last one, and that is the equipment utilization report. And it's showing us the utilization based on hours. All right. And if you know about this, great, but it's showing us the listing of our equipment. It's showing us the hours, whether they be standby or usage for total hours, and then our utilization for each. A nice quick snapshot. If we're an equipment company, how effective or productive is our dispatcher in dispatching and keeping equipment in use, including the shop? How effective are we in turning around repairs and maintenance and other major repairs? All the things that enter into utilization. So these tend to be really interesting reports and high impact for a lot of the equipment companies that we do. So just wanted you to be aware of these. And when I say equipment companies, could also be a fleet of vehicles. So, all right, a quick example of calculating ROI. Again, this is about cost. How do we know what our ROI is when we invest in a piece of equipment? And this could be yellow iron. It could be something in the office or in the shop. But the calculation for ROI is you take the cost of that piece. Maybe we spent $100,000 on a thing. And through analysis, we project that it's going to save us $30,000 a year for 5 years. Okay. And that we'll get 10 out of it at the end of that life in salvage or resale value, whatever. So our ROI is 60%. So how did we get there? Well, step one is we calculate our total gain over time. We're going to gain $30,000 for 5 years. Plus, we're going to get 10 resale or salvage value at the end. So that adds up to 160 grand. That's what we're going to get. We then subtract the cost of that equipment. So 160 minus our 100 investment is, all right, $60,000. So we divide that by, whoops, come back to me. I got to be careful with my mouse. We divide that by the $100,000 investment we made for 60%. So there's our 60% return on an investment in a piece of equipment over 5 years. And I hope this is helpful as you're thinking about how do I calculate that if I'm thinking of buying something for my company. And then contrast with other pieces or other options to get to that same end. Right. Loan covenants. We see when we see this, we see this. If we don't, we don't. But let's just say you had a loan covenant and you need to monitor whether certain items on your financial statements are within range of what your agreement is with the bank. In other words, you agree that AR will be a certain amount or under an AP or whatever. How can you do that in Spectrum without incurring a whole lot of cost? This is about cost, right? So I wanted to show you trying to get my shift tab isn't shift tabbing for me. I wanted to show you that if we're only looking at totals, total AR, total AP, total whatever on the financial statement, we can actually generate a financial statement that zeroes in on just that so that we or one of our people can be monitoring this throughout the month, throughout the period, so that we don't have surprises at some point in time and a distraction, okay? So I made a quick financial statement that's showing maybe the bank said we've got to keep our cash and our AR and our retainage at certain levels. And maybe if we subtract our current liabilities, there needs to be a certain, I'm calling this working capital or net to cover loan agreement. We can make a financial statement to show us this if we're looking at total AR, total AP. And just as quickly as I've done it here, you or your financial people can be checking this maybe once a week or once a month, again, to avoid surprises later. And just without going down a rabbit hole, my next question, if you're interested in this, would be, well, how did you do that? Well, if you pop over to geo maintenance, design financial reports, what I did is I copied the an income statement to another format, to another one, and then I modified the rows in that puppy. And there will be a lot more here for a financial statement. I deleted the ones that aren't relevant, so that I'm only looking at the ranges of accounts for assets, for liabilities, and such that I need to be looking at for that loan covenant. And so again, if you're comfortable with Financial Statement Designer, copy one that works for you and modify it to what you need. Okay. Alternatively, and your consultant can help you with that if you need that help. Alternatively, maybe your current AR needs to stay at a certain level. Total AR may be what it is. You're 60, 90 above. That's not part of the covenant. The current needs to be a certain amount. Or maybe I probably said that backwards. Well, at this point, the financial statement doesn't capture that. It's just total AR. It's not the aging or totals by those aging buckets. And so the easiest way to handle that is to have someone do an Excel query. That's again, cost here. That's the cheapest way to get that handled for you, is find someone that can do an Excel query to get that right in front of you in Excel, something that can self-refresh so you've got it for you. We've also got, analytics tools and Power BI. My humble opinion, in this specific one, it's kind of putting a sledgehammer on it. It can work, but if we're managing costs, you just need it done. Find someone that can help you with a custom Excel query. All right, quick recap. We looked at monitoring and adjusting for productivity. We looked at managing the cost of overhead. We looked at monitoring that we're getting a return of our cost on investments in other operations, our markets, etc. We talked about some general guidelines on technology investment. Of course, there's a lot of conversation that has to happen around that. Talked at a high level around when to be thinking about hiring key personnel. All of these related to cost. Looked at maximizing ROI and a couple tools in Spectrum to do that for our equipment. And then a couple ways to watch debt management and loan covenants that were in compliance there. So I hope this has been helpful. Been my pleasure. I know your time is valuable, and thanks for being here. I'll hand off to you here, Stephen.
Yeah, Mike, we have just one question that came in.
Sure.
Does a company need to have a controller, CFO, accounting professional before adding a true job costing accounting software like Spectrum?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you for asking that. The short answer is you need it to run your system. You need an accounting manager, a controller, a CFO, somebody who's got job cost accounting experience, and they can run Spectrum for you so that you can focus on the other aspects of your business. If the owner operator thinks he or she's going to be that person, you won't be focusing on the rest of your business, and you'll be very frustrated. Short answer is yes.
Does anybody else have any questions before we jump off? If so, just go ahead and put them in the Q&A.
Stephen, can I comment on that last one really quick?
Sure.
So we do run into that with a lot of people that are interested in this. And I can't give you a black and white answer. We're here to help, and we want you to be successful. If your company doesn't have that person for whatever reason, you can consider outsourcing that. We've got relationship with CPA firms that can provide that service. We've provided that service at certain times. And I think the idea is there should be a plan where you use that outsourced service and learn. Maybe you hire somebody and they learn. And I'm kind of a 3 months transition. Maybe you watch that person for 3 months, and then the next 3 months, they watch you to make sure, your controller, to make sure that that person's got what they need. But there should be a plan to transition out of that outsource and into your own person over time.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other questions in the Q&A or in the chat. So just want to say thank you to Mike, and thank you for everyone for jumping on. As mentioned earlier at the top, we'll send out an email here later today with some follow-up information along with Mike's contact information if you have any further questions. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.